Right now, Europe is trembling and the world is changing fast. A political earthquake shakes Prague. A pro-Russian billionaire Andrej Babiš wins the Czech elections. Will Moscow gain another ally inside the EU? At the same time, Ukrainians' power in the skies grow. New Western fighter jets are on the way. And Europe is finally rethinking its air defense strategy. And across the Atlantic, the United States make a shocking turn. Tomahawk missiles are heading to Ukraine. The question is this the moment Putin finally realized he's lost the war? Welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Zoroslava Kolesnikova. Stay tuned because history is being written right now. Czech elections earthquake. Pro-Russian billionaire Babiš wins. Andrej Babiš, ex-prime minister, billionaire and outspoken Eurosceptic, has come out on top in the Czech elections. Known for his admiration of Orban and Fico, Babiš's victory could tilt Prague closer to Moscow's orbit. Will this shift fracture Europe's unity on Ukraine, and is the Kremlin quietly celebrating another win inside the EU?
In the Czech elections, the ANO party led by former Prime Minister, billionaire and Eurosceptic Andrej Babiš came in first. He is known for his, to put it mildly, pro-Russian views and his admiration for leaders like Orban and Fico.
Ukraine is not ready for the European Union. We must first end the war. We can cooperate, but you are not ready.
Babiš is also called the Czech Trump, who is likely a fan of the US president. The pro-European coalition Together, led by current Prime Minister Petr Fiala, was supported by more than 20%. The country has elected deputies who will decide which course the Czech Republic will take over the next 4 years.
The idea that we are dragging the Czech Republic somewhere to the east is a lie that politicians from the government use to scare people.
None of the parties managed to surpass the 50% threshold, and the next government in the country will be a coalition. In fact, the coalition can be either official or informal.
The current prime minister represents the center-right, so I think they will also try to form their own coalition.
Babiš made many promises to increase social benefits and lower taxes, but took a cautious stance on a number of European Union initiatives. Similar statements have long been made by the leaders of two other EU countries, Hungary and Slovakia.
Now, if we imagine a scenario where Babiš does become prime minister, I think he will seek communication with both Orban and Fico, and we will end up with a sort of triumvirate of Central European countries that, to put it mildly, will not have a very positive attitude toward Ukraine. We already feel this from Orban, to a lesser extent from Fico, but there are still some conflicts, and now Babiš will be added to them as well. And what is very important is that this is yet another force that, let's say, carries an anti-EU ideology.
On the first day of the elections, the Czech police received anonymous threats about a large number of drones approaching the country's borders. Security measures were tightened in Prague and at Václav Havel Airport. The Kremlin tried to stir up the situation in its usual style. Right before the vote, a large-scale network operating to promote Russian narratives was uncovered in the Czech Republic. Analysts identified about 300 anonymous TikTok accounts that were actively spreading propaganda in favor of radical parties advocating for the Czech Republic's exit from NATO and the European Union. At the same time, the parties denied any foreign influence on their election campaign. The main goal of the Kremlin in every European country is to undermine faith in democratic mechanisms, legal norms, as well as membership in the EU and NATO.
Russia is the most serious threat to the country's security.
The victory of Babiš's party seemed to please the Kremlin, but as usual, the happiness is incomplete. It will not get its own majority, which means the party leader will have to look for partners. The problem is that he'll have to look among those who openly call him a populist playing into Moscow's hands. Andrej Babiš served as Prime Minister of the Czech Republic from December 2017 to December 2021. His party was defeated in the parliamentary elections in 2021. In January 23, former NATO general and current Czech President Petr Pavel defeated Babiš in the presidential election. And today, in 25, the main role will pass to the non-partisan President Petr Pavel, who will have to task someone with forming the government. Now the main question is, can Babiš become Prime Minister again?
After all, it's usually the prime minister who decides more than the president. But the president also has a certain influence on the country's political processes. It's a kind of balance of power. And we understand that a hypothetical Prime Minister Babiš and Accordingly, President Pavel are different people. They represent different political forces. Accordingly, this would already be a conflict between the president and the prime minister if, again, Babiš becomes prime minister, if the ANO party manages to unite all the other forces around itself.
Babiš himself openly denies any sympathy for the Kremlin, recalling an incident that happened when he was already prime minister. His government declared 18 Russian diplomats to be spies and expelled them from the country. This happened after an investigation into explosions at ammunition depots revealed that it was not just anyone, but Russian special services who were behind them.
It's a paradox. But there are practically no official materials regarding this case.
But soon after, Babiš once again started talking about the need for dialogue and the importance of economic ties with Russia.
There is a widely held opinion that Andrej Babiš largely made his significant financial fortune thanks to substantial Russian capital and money. Accordingly, he is perceived as someone who has close ties with Russia, close ties with the Kremlin, and this poses a threat to Ukraine.
How the victory of the right in the Czech elections will affect Ukraine is a concern not only for Ukrainians themselves, but also for Europeans.
I have met with Zelensky 3 times. We help Ukraine through the EU. We pay large sums into the European budget, so we are already helping.
During the campaign, Babiš criticized what he considered to be excessive aid to Ukrainian refugees.
First, they raised taxes for Czech parents, took away child benefits, and cut privileges. And now, imagine, they are coming up with maternity leave for Ukrainian women. Not for our women, but for Ukrainian women.
Being a right-wing populist, he has repeatedly spoken about the need to cut or wind down aid programs for Ukraine. But experts believe that his rhetoric could change dramatically after the elections.
People promise a lot of things, but when they win the elections and come to power, they can suddenly change their attitudes. Because after all, it's one thing, the slogans they use to get into power, and another thing is what they actually have to do, considering the redistribution of EU budget funds. A person might really go around saying, we need to stop helping Ukraine, we need to end everything, but then comes to power and realizes that's not the case. Because of this, they might end up not receiving EU budget funds. Plus, there are the risks that we all see for European countries, risks that Poland sees, that Finland, Denmark, and Norway see. So all these sentiments are present as well. And the image of a force that would act as a hypothetical collaborator with Russia, nobody wants that.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukraine to receive new batch of Western fighter jets, air power rising. Ukraine's skies are about to become deadlier for the occupiers. The General Staff has officially confirmed the upcoming transfer of another batch of Western fighter jets to strengthen the country's air force. This modern aircraft will significantly boost Ukrainians' ability to both defend its cities from missiles and drone attacks and strike deep into enemy positions. Could this be the turning point in Ukrainians' fight for air superiority? And how will Moscow respond when Western fighters appear over the battlefield?
To defend more effectively and attack more successfully, the Ukrainian General Staff has confirmed the upcoming transfer of an additional batch of Western fighter jets to the armed forces of Ukraine. In addition, new deliveries of Patriot systems are expected from several allies at once. This fall, Ukraine definitely does not intend to leave Moscow's strikes unanswered.
Obviously, the Air Force's impressive fleet will be significantly expanded, and our overall capabilities will undoubtedly grow even further. This is important.
In an interview with the BBC, Ukraine's first Deputy Defense Minister, Lieutenant General Ivan Havrilyuk, said that Kyiv is preparing to receive several types of new aircraft at once.
Havrilyuk was asked when the next deliveries would take place. He replied, "Let's just say, when you see them in the skies over Ukraine, then you'll know." Bravo. A very good correct answer. So that the enemy doesn't understand or know, but also so that there are no unrealistic expectations here. Just a clear, normal, pragmatic working position. They'll be in the air carrying out combat missions, and we'll see.
The only thing Havrilyuk revealed was the models of the upcoming reinforcements. So, we're talking about a new batch of F-16S, French Mirage 2000S, and Swedish Gripens.
These are exceptionally highly effective and incredibly powerful aircraft, meticulously developed by the Swedish aerospace industry, specifically to skillfully counter a significantly stronger, much better resourced adversary.
Analysts explain, given the number of sorties flown by Ukrainian aviation, the issue of maintainability is far from insignificant. It is also extremely important that the aircraft can be equipped with Ukrainian, European and American weaponry on its hard points. After all, supplies to Ukraine are now coming from all over the world, and the Gripen meets these requirements.
All these years, the Swedish army has been preparing to fight against the Russian Federation, and accordingly, the aircraft they developed, specifically the JAS-39, were designed to be maintainable, relatively inexpensive and multifunctional.
At the same time, in terms of maneuverability, they are head and shoulders above all Soviet aircraft and many Western ones, which will give our pilots a clear advantage when operating directly near the front line.
The fighters are very reliable, highly effective, and in some technical specifications, they are even better than the F-16S we are expecting to receive.
Another addition to the Ukrainian Air Force will be the French Mirages, aircraft already familiar to our pilots and especially often used for long-range strikes with Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles.
6,900 kilograms of payload. This can include bombs, missiles, a huge variety. Moreover, there can be external fuel tanks, so the payload weight may decrease if increased range is needed or if the aircraft simply needs to stay in the air for a long time. For example, for intercepting something or for patrolling.
At the same time, analysts say these aircraft also perform well during large-scale operations. The fact is that French fighter jets have an advanced data transmission system between aircraft, which allows them to carry out missions more effectively as a group.
It can communicate with AWACS systems, and thanks to this, it can see much more. This essentially compensates for the shortcomings of its own radar. The ability to create three-dimensional objects on the display simplifies both ground attacks and flying at low altitudes. However, it should be noted that Mirages are specifically designed to operate as a team. They exchange information with each other with ground-based radars and with AWACS systems.
In addition to carrying out more effective strikes, Ukraine will also be able to defend itself more efficiently. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, Israel delivered an additional Patriot air defense system to us at the end of the summer. 2 more systems are already on their way.
The Israeli system has been operating in Ukraine for a month. We will receive 2 Patriot systems in the fall. That's all for now. I won't say anything more about the Patriot.
But the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, on the other hand, was quite willing to talk. He confirmed that it is Berlin that is handling the delivery of Patriots to Ukraine, in addition to the 3 already provided. However, the main intrigue surrounding the transfer of additional weapons to Ukraine today remains the American Tomahawk missiles. The Institute for the Study of War stated that Moscow is already trying to disrupt these deliveries, claiming that in response it might deploy its own Oreshnik in Venezuela. However, according to rumors from Washington, these threats have had no effect on the White House.
Europe reconsiders aid, air defense for Ukraine back on the table. Across Europe, leaders are realizing that without stronger skies, there can be no victory. Several EU nations are now discussing new packages of air defense systems and aviation support for Ukraine. Will Europe finally move from promises to real protection and help Ukraine secure its airspace once and for all?
Even more help and support. The European Commission has agreed with Ukraine to allocate €2 billion for drone production. The funding is intended to help strengthen defense capabilities and develop high technologies that will also benefit the European Union.
If we still consider Ukraine to be our first line of defense, we must increase military aid to Ukraine. That's why we specifically agreed with Ukraine that a total of €2 billion will now be spent on drones. This allows Ukraine to scale up and use its full potential. And of course, this will also allow the EU to benefit from this technology.
Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has ramped up weapons production and the implementation of new technologies, which are already being used on the front lines. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased many times over.
This points to an increase in the capabilities of Ukraine's defense forces, primarily in terms of striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you, earlier Germany announced the allocation of 1.8 billion euros to the Ukrainian side for the production of strike drones and the manufacturing of Ukrainian ballistic missiles. In other words, EU countries continue to demonstrate unity when it comes to strengthening the defense capabilities of Ukraine's defense forces.
Ukraine is also negotiating a mega deal with the US worth $90 billion for the purchase of weapons. Kyiv has provided Washington with detailed documents outlining all military needs, including requests for long-range weapon systems.
First and foremost, air defense systems will be received. This refers to the Patriot surface-to-air missile systems. By the way, President Zelensky has already noted that the Israeli-supplied Patriot SAM systems have been actively protecting Ukraine's airspace for a month. In addition, NASAM's air defense systems, which are a joint American-Norwegian production, will also be supplied and, above all, means of destruction. This refers to ARAMs. Their technical specifications include a range of 450 kilometers and, most importantly, their quantity, 3,300 units.
And while this deal is still at the negotiation stage, 6 NATO countries have financed 4 defense aid packages for Ukraine totaling more than $2 billion as part of the Ukraine Priority Requirements List initiative.
The order is being formed based on the needs of the Ukrainian defense forces. In addition, this makes it possible to speed up the logistics of transferring American weapons directly to the Ukrainian defense forces. This significantly increases the capabilities of the Ukrainian defense forces in countering the Russian occupation forces at this moment.
Meanwhile, the EU has found a way to legally use Russia's frozen assets. The European Union is discussing the possibility of providing Ukraine with about 140 billion euros in the form of a so-called reparations loan. The EU proposes to allocate part of the money for the purchase of European weapons and the other part to finance Ukraine's budgetary needs. But not everyone agrees with these proposals. French President Emmanuel Macron is critical of such initiatives.
Let me emphasize once again, we're talking about the lack of legal mechanisms for seizing frozen Russian assets. In other words, the European Commission, having said A, did not say B. This was a political statement not backed up from a legal standpoint. It's not worth making empty promises, fully understanding that there are no mechanisms to fulfill them. So, the statement by the European Commission should be regarded as nothing more than a political statement, or as an element of political and economic pressure on the Russian Federation at the moment of ending the war in Ukraine. And Macron's statement indicates an understanding of these processes.
For its part, the United Kingdom has already spent a truly significant and substantial amount, more than £1 billion, on supplying essential weapons and crucial military support to Ukraine, diligently using funds meticulously obtained from frozen Russian assets.
US makes a turn. Tomahawk missiles headed to Ukraine. A historic shift in Washington's policy is underway. Vice President J.D. Vance announced that the White House is preparing to supply Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles, a weapon once considered off-limits. Just 2 days later, US Special Envoy Kit Kellogg confirmed the plan. Could this be the moment that changes the entire course of war?
A 180-degree turn. Very soon, the White House will provide Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles. This was stated over the weekend in an interview with Fox News by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. And just 2 days later, U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg confirmed these intentions. Donald Trump will allow Ukraine to carry out long-range strikes on Russia.
I think that having read what he said, as well as what Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio said, the answer is yes. Use the opportunity to carry out long-range strikes. There is nothing sacred about it. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that last week President Zelensky asked President Trump to obtain Tomahawk missiles.
Just 2 weeks ago, Trump and his administration were categorically opposed to transferring, let alone striking Russian territory with American Tomahawk missiles. But after the meeting between Zelensky and Trump in New York on September 23rd, the White House's rhetoric changed. Ukraine's main argument is that having such missiles could increase pressure on Russia and force Putin to come to the negotiating table, possibly even without actually using this type of weapon. The transfer of Tomahawks also drew a response from the Kremlin. Putin's press secretary Peskov stated that there is no magic weapon for Kyiv that can change the dynamics on the battlefield.
There is no panacea that can change the situation on the front lines right now for the Kyiv regime. There is no magic weapon, and whether it's Tomahawks or other missiles, they won't be able to change the dynamics.
Tomahawk missiles have a range of up to 1,600 kilometers, which significantly exceeds the capabilities of the American ATACMS multiple launch rocket systems used by the Ukrainian armed forces. The Tomahawk has greater speed and combat power compared to Ukrainian drones, which are capable of striking deep into Russian territory, but often encounter modern Russian air defense systems.
This is a bad message for the military and those who support them, who are located in the Bryansk, Kursk, Voronezh and Rostov regions at the very least, and of course in the occupied territories. Wherever there are enemy military facilities, I believe that the demilitarization of Crimea from Russian presence will also continue, and Donetsk is occupied, as is Luhansk. There will be even more strikes on them.
President Zelensky handed President Trump a list of the necessary military aid as part of a $90 billion agreement. Additionally, Ukraine wants to hold separate negotiations with the US regarding the supply of specific types of weapons, particularly long-range ones.
All of this is provided for in our $90 billion agreement, but we are ready for separate agreements on specific types of weapons, including long-range ones. I can't share any more details.
The student is far away. I can't give any more details.
According to the British publication The Sun, Ukrainian attacks on the oil refining sector alone have caused Russia more than $100 billion in damage. And that's without Tomahawk missiles. If they appear, the amount of damage will increase many times over.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you believe the truth must be louder than propaganda, like, comment and subscribe. Want to stand with us on the information front? Become a sponsor and help us expose lies, defend freedom and keep Ukrainians' voice strong. Stay informed, stay strong and stay with Ukraine.